Welcome to the New Warehouse Podcast, the podcast for those that are curious about what's possible inside their four walls. Before we get into this episode, let's hear a word from our sponsors that make this all possible. If you want visibility from the boardroom to the warehouse floor, then you need IFS Softion's WMS powered by Industrial AI. IFS Softion's WMS combines deep industry expertise, robotics orchestration, and proven warehouse execution in a single seamless platform. With more than 2 decades of experience and a 100% deployment success rate, IFS Softion helps you optimize fulfillment operations and solve your complex warehouse challenges. Learn more at www.softion.com. That's www.softion.com. It's Modex season, and as the industry prepares to descend upon Atlanta, marketing is top of mind for many supply chain leaders. Is your company's marketing and PR connecting with decision makers to drive business? If you need marketing project support, Master Plan Communications is a great resource to help you make it happen. For 15 years, Master Plan Communications marketing and PR have been building awareness and creating demand for material handling companies. MPC offers strategic marketing and PR planning, media relations, video productions, photography, websites, digital marketing, social media, and more. Connect with MPC at masterplancommunications.com and on LinkedIn. Is your fulfillment operation ready for the next surge in demand? Don't wait until productivity stalls to think about automation. Get proactive and talk to Ocado Intelligent Automation to find out when to start your automation journey, how smart software orchestration accelerates performance, and how AMRs like Chuck scale across sites and seasons. Learn how flexible deployment, ongoing support, and real scalability help you meet your customer expectations before peak hits. Head to OcadoIntelligentAutomation.com to start your warehouse automation journey and find them in booth B10119. That's B10119 at Modex. Thank you to our sponsors, and now let's get to the podcast.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we are going to talk all about food safety within the warehouse. And we're going to be joined by Dr. Stephen Neel, who is the Vice President of Global Food Optimization at Lineage. And Lineage moves an absolute ton of food, actually several tons of food, I believe. So we'll hear a little bit about that today. But he is focused on that food safety and overall food optimization within Lineage. And so we're going to learn a little bit about what goes into that. How do they leverage technology to make that better? How do they standardize that across all of their operations? And also, what does the future of food safety within the warehouse and logistics setting look like? So very interested to dive into this today. And as I'm sure everybody listening eats food, right? So we're going to learn a little bit about what goes into that today. So Dr. Stephen Neel, great to get you on and happy to talk about this topic today. One I think that is very, very important, but you are representing Lineage Logistics today. So tell us a little bit about Lineage for people that maybe are not familiar and maybe give us like the scope too on just how much kind of food is being handled within the Lineage network overall.
Well, Lineage has grown dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years. But we started as sort of a small warehouse group that was basically storing food, perishable food, on behalf of our customers. We don't necessarily own the food. We're a third-party logistics provider. So we store everything you can conceive of that's perishable. You think about your Thanksgiving dinner, it's in our building somewhere. So we've grown over time to be a rather large network of cold storage providers. I think we're over 500 buildings in 20 some countries around the world. And just within the United States, we're running or operating about 250 buildings coast to coast. And they provide all sorts of services. I mean, fundamentally, we sell cold air. We have one commodity. It's cold air. You can buy it in three flavors, cool, cold, and very cold. But the idea is that fundamentally our job is to keep food cold, keep it covered, keep it moving. And those are the three basics. But our business has evolved over time as we've grown and as our customers have had challenges in their supply chains. Our business has evolved to take on more of a food processing role or a food production role than it did a food storage role. So we still, at our core, we store food, but we're also finding that from a food safety perspective, we have to do more and more to protect our customers' brand equity. We become an extension of their business because they may not have the labor to do everything that they did, 5 years ago, because the world has just changed. The logistics world has become so diversified that we're being asked to do more in the food space than we ever have. And that brings with it some unique challenges. These are buildings, in our industry, you look at our industry as a whole, our buildings are older. They may be, 5 years old, they may be 50 years old. And technology within the building is static for the most part. I mean, you can't add some of the food processing elements like floor drains and you can do a lot of things, but we ultimately have to adjust to our customers' expectations in a food space and convert space within the warehouse to be a little more food friendly, if you will. So from our perspective, we see this as a value-added service. We're providing not just a storage service for our customers, but we're doing boxing and labeling and blast freezing and tempering and exporting and importing and all these other services that actually may introduce risk. Our original mandate was sort of do no harm, just pass it through our business and leave it, in the same state it received. But when we're changing phases, when we're adding boxes or we're doing things that are value added, it actually gives us the opportunity to introduce risk, which changes the rules somewhat.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting to hear that, right? Because as you said, it used to be like, all right, the food is just passing through in it essentially, right? But now it sounds like you're getting more involved to these value add service as you talk about, right? So tell us a little bit about like what does that mean? Like when you talk about the value added services and doing a little more food production side, are you like putting different foods together, repackaging items? What does that entail?
A bit of all. So you take the fundamental process of storage of food, and it either arrives at our building frozen, then it leaves frozen. Well, that's the most basic fundamental storage opportunity. You basically keep it cold. But when we receive fresh food, we may be doing a phase change, taking it and rapidly freezing it or blast freezing it to preserve quality and safety. And then we may take it and store it, or we may break it down and case pick it or unit pick it so that we're building meal kits for a menu service type of a thing, or sending it to a convenience store in inches. So I think our business just gets more complex, and it really becomes, in our world, it becomes inside the box thinking. And we sort of rebranded ourselves a few years ago because everybody says, hey, think outside the box. And logistics is a big machine. Well, we're foodies. And if you're a consumer, you need to think inside the box because each type of food has different temperature sensitivities, different responses to cold. And if you sort of think of yourself as a food whisperer, you have to put yourself in the place of that commodity and say, well, how is this particular product going to respond to a microclimate change within a big building? And you're running a building at -5 Fahrenheit, but that food may not like it quite that cold. It may do better at +3. Or if it's ice cream, it may do better at -22. we have to understand what's inside the box so that we can anticipate that microclimate impact that may happen within our care and custody so that we don't diminish the brand equity, diminish the food quality, ice crystallization of ice cream or clumping of peas. Any of those types of quality degradations are reflect back poorly on us, but also on our customers, our suppliers, because it's their brand we're trying to protect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what you said there at the end is paramount, right? Especially when you're in the contract logistics third party space, right? At the end of the day, like you're supporting your customer, being able to support their customer and give them that experience that they're expecting there. And I think very interesting to hear, how you are handling some of these things. Like you mentioned the meal kits, or I imagine it's like subscription boxes in some sense too, as well. And then also taking fresh product, as you said, and blast freezing it and things like that. I'm curious now, I mean, how has that evolved and changed over time? And is it because of this now, world we're living in where so many things are available online, including food and these different assortments of packaging and stuff? Is that really what's kind of shifted the way you approach some of these things? Or I guess maybe even shifted what's demanded of you from your customers as well?
It has, but you think about how as consumers we've evolved. We're back with food with a face. Where our food comes from or came from matters. We want to know so much about the food in our supply chain that we're not only looking. So traceability becomes a key element, and not just traceability, but all of the aspects of that harvest. They want to know everything about it. So all of that data, it's a very data-driven business. So we're trying to communicate and transfer information through a logistics system that is almost endless. I mean, our customers are differentiating themselves with detail. They want, they're talking about the types of products, where they come from. They want to have information about the producer, about the animal itself, or the food itself. And so all of that data is being driven through our business, and the warehouse is being expected to capture, store, and communicate all that information through in an accurate and a seamless manner. It simply creates a challenge in terms of all that transference. So I think our business has evolved to try and understand the customer's demands and needs, communicate all that information through in a cohesive manner so that the consumer can have higher confidence in what they're purchasing. So it's just about an evolutionary perspective from our standpoint, saying, what systems do we have to upgrade? How do we change our buildings? These big cold boxes, boxes full of cold air. How do we segregate within that? Boxes within boxes, systems within systems, traceability and challenges so that we can capture and communicate data. Because it's really, we're a logistics business, we're a data company, we're also a bunch of foodies. So those three things have to sort of coexist.
Yeah, exactly. And I think really interesting there to hear about kind of how this has changed and also how you're approaching it too, right? Because as you mentioned, right, some of these buildings are 50 years old, and obviously, standing up a building that needs refrigeration and a large freezer is not as easy as, standing up some of these ambient buildings we see that just go up in, a matter of weeks, basically, right? So there's a lot more that goes into that from a infrastructure perspective and being able to do that. So I'm curious, let's kind of define maybe some of the differentiation and the challenges there. Like what are you looking, I mean, cold storage in itself has its challenges on its own, right? But now when you're doing cold storage for food in particular, there's a whole nother set of challenges. So tell us a little bit about, what are some of kind of the biggest challenges that when it comes to ensuring this food safety within the building in comparison to just like a regular, ambient storage warehouse that's moving pallets in and out?
Well, so it starts with assessing the products independently. There's really no one size fits all solution here. If you're living inside the box, then the food is going to dictate the storage conditions. It's going to dictate the segregation, the traceability. There's a lot of elements that are sort of baked into that product. So it starts with assessing each commodity group or customer's product specifically to see where it fits in the warehouse and how the warehouse needs to be modified to accept it, to accommodate it. So, the days of having a single room with 50,000 pallet positions are much more challenging than what our systems are calling for right now, which is sort of micromanagement within the building. How do you take a product off of a truck, get it across the dock, get it to the right place in the warehouse, and then track that product for the appropriate period of time, capture all the data, and then transfer that product? Now, maybe you're taking that inbound product and you're going to break it down into eaches or the smaller kits. Maybe you're going to repackage it. Maybe you're going to blast freeze it, store it, and then temper it so they can go into further processing. All of those things bring significant food safety complexity. Not only does the building need to be designed to accommodate that potential food safety risk, not only from the customer's expectations, but from the regulatory perspective. But now we've got to build out the technology to support that, train the people. A warehouse worker who's driving a forklift and maybe have been driving a forklift for 20 years may be challenged to do something outside of their comfort zone related to touching food, to manipulating food, boxing it or unboxing it. Well, there's a whole bunch of training that goes into that, and monitoring and continuous improvement and verification. That becomes much more of a food business approach. You're doing preoperative sanitation checks, mid-course checks, post-operative sanitation, training, record keeping. All of those complexities drive cost, which means we're trying to do so in an efficient way, but they also introduce or potentially introduce food safety risk. So it's about getting the right people to do the right jobs in the right circumstances with the right food. And that is just, it's become very challenging. It's something that many warehouses struggle with because we have been traditionally pallet in, pallet out logistics, just push the product through as quickly as you can. Now we have to reset our minds and put ourselves in our customer's position. We are an extension of their brand.
Yeah, very interesting there, and very interesting. Great example there about forklift driver, 20 years, right? I've always just moved pallets around basically, and now all of a sudden I need to do a little more handling. Like, well, what do I do, right? Like, what are the steps to be able to do that? So let's talk a little bit about the technology aspect, because you mentioned traceability in there, right? And obviously, when you talk about moving pallet quantities of something, like there's less movements than if you're breaking it down into eaches, right? But now in the world that we live in, obviously we're breaking more things down into eaches. I imagine you're doing from an e-commerce perspective and doing these kind of meal preps, as you said, or these subscription boxes or things of that nature that are going out. So now tell us a little bit about how do you approach traceability? Like what kind of technologies are you leveraging to be able to do that? And what are the key points, and I guess what really matters when we're talking about traceability?
When we talk about traceability, it's about real-time data capture. There's a regulatory requirement on traceability, which is driven by the Food and Drug Administration, and we all know about FSMA 204, and they may have pushed pause on implementation because there was some supply chain challenges that just weren't, quite frankly, worked out in their rule. But the industry hasn't pushed pause on that. The customers are still expecting this. The suppliers are still trying to differentiate themselves through providing this information. The consumers demand this level of knowledge, but yet the systems throughout the entire supply chain may not be speaking to each other in a level that allows for that initial capture of data, those critical data elements or KDDs that are driving traceability. They have to be captured. They have to be verified as accurate. Then they have to be ingested into every single step of the supply chain, from supply or from capture all the way through to consumption. And in theory, that makes great sense. In application, it's a systems nightmare. I mean, our systems simply, we struggle within the warehouse sector for building to build building A to talk to building B. Now we're bringing in upstream and downstream supply chain challenges about data moving real time through a system. When it takes software solutions, there has to be each independent WMS or warehouse management system must be assessed against all of the potential data inputs. And that means going to almost every supplier, certainly the key suppliers, and saying, how are you going to send us these KDEs, this data? How will we ingest data? Are our scanners capable? Do we have open fields in the software to add, unique data elements that are not standardized across the industry? And then how do we assign that to that product and then track it through the system and then send it to the next person down the chain because their systems may not be capable of receiving it. So what this is really forces is a conversation about capabilities and collaboration between supply chain systems to say, can we receive data from at least 80% of our suppliers accurately? And what do we do about the 20% that don't have that data or don't have verified accurate data or the data changes? So it becomes, and that's way above my pay grade, this becomes an IT solving, an IT nightmare saying, can they write code? Can they build bridges? Can they create software patches fast enough and flexible enough to assess? Because my job when compliance is to reach out to the FDA or to the customer and say, yes, we got it right. And yes, I can say with confidence that I captured the data that is required. I harvested it, I stored it, and I shipped it on the BOL or bill of lading. And if I can't say that, then technically I'm non-compliant. Well, I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know is it my fault? I don't know. But at some point in time, you have to work as a unit, as an integrated supply chain to satisfy that expectation, which is a good expectation. I mean, as a consumer, I love it, and you probably do too. Getting there's a challenge, and it's going to take a lot of gray matter to figure out the software solutions. Now, from a foods perspective, I'm still looking at it as put your eyes on the product and verify. Is the product what it says it is? Is it properly labeled? Is it properly received? Is it properly stored? I mean, we're still we still rely on our nose and our eyes. It'll never be replaced by AI. You can't create an artificial sniffer. It's going to come down to food safety management fundamentals, which is the way it's always been and always will be. But we'll use the technology to help us verify faster, do better searches, and bring other people into get greater visibility across our network. So you don't have to be physically standing in a building to physically smell a product, but somebody's got to put a nose in a box. That's just the way it always, at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to that human sniffer, because that's what ultimately guarantees our freshness.
Interesting. Yeah. No, the artificial sniffer.
I won't be AI out of business. Let's put it that way. I'm an old guy, but within my career, they won't figure out how to artificially sniff food. I mean, it's gonna remain a human trait.
Yes. So very, very interesting there. And I think, interesting to hear too, at the core of that, right, is the data in the sense, right? Whether it's being captured by, system, computer, or it's being captured by eyes or nose, as you mentioned there, and being able to make sure that that's passing through the entire supply chain, basically from node to node. So I'm curious, what happens when we talk about food, right? We've seen in the past where there's been, these kind of large scale recalls on certain products because I think there was a lettuce recall, right? Because E. coli or something was in there. So in the past, like when that happens, what needs to happen from your perspective? Like how do you handle a recall? Like your customer, I guess, gets the notice, lets what does that process look like?
So it's become very complicated as our global supply chain has evolved. I mean, we're dealing with, if you recall, the highest profile one we've heard recently was you've got shrimp that is hasn't been ready. It's radioactive. It's radioactive shrimp coming from Indonesia or Malaysia or some Vietnam.
Yeah, that sounds like a movie, right?
A movie.
The radioactive
But it's a real movie. I mean, this is a reality show now because we received.
I remember.
All of us in the cold storage sector received this product that our government, discovered and disclosed had been improperly treated or exposed to radiation and was radioactive, and we were I mean, this is hair on fire, stop, drop, and roll. We cannot let this food into the food supply because we don't know how safe it is or what the potential damage is. So again, we don't own the food. We are working on behalf of the importers and the suppliers and the customers and the retailers saying, hey, we buy a lot of this particular product. And same thing goes for, whether it's an E. coli on lettuce or whether it's contaminated ground beef, anything that is adulterated or perceived to be adulterated. The regulatory authorities go to the common denominator, which would be the storage location. They can't necessarily chase down every vessel. They can't chase down every shrimp farmer in Vietnam or Indonesia or Malaysia. They go to the common the choke point, which is generally speaking where the product is imported or it's received for the base change in storage. So we were notified by the FDA in this particular case that there was potential for contaminated shrimp that had already been received into our country. This wasn't in transit. This wasn't close to borders. This was, hey, we've got food in our country that may not be safe for human consumption. Now, out of an abundance of caution, the FDA said, recall. We don't want this getting out. Well, we have an obligation not only to be in compliance with the federal government, but with our customers to say we need to know exactly where all that product is. So we start reaching out to everybody in our supply chain and say we can originally we search our systems. Do we have any shrimp in our buildings? And we can do that through our search of our WMS. We put the word out to all of our import sites saying we want you to look for proactively. This is before there was ever a recall. Proactively look for any imported shrimp. And okay, so we've got 45 import sites in the United States, and maybe 15 of them had imported shrimp. Okay, we immediately said, okay, identify that product and let's put that on a hard hold until we can get more information. Is this product under an active recall? Put it on hold. So we notify the customers that we have some of their product that is in our warehouse that we're going to put on hold. And nobody argues with this. I mean, there was no pushback saying, hey, everybody sees this, everybody's worried about this because the customers have got a financial investment here. I mean, this product may have to be destroyed.
Oh yeah,
so it's huge. It's a huge financial risk. So our first response is a proactive hard hold. Then we begin to work with the regulators and with the customers on either end of the spectrum to say, are these the affected lots? If they are affected lots, then they go into a segregated area until we can work on disposition. If they can be released, we need to get the appropriate approvals to get the release. But basically, it's a very active, it's a one step up, one step back, function to look where products are coming from, where they're going to overlay the federal government to get their perspective. And you get containment. And when you get containment, you can take that first deep breath. You say, okay, did we lose anything? And if we've lost something, I mean, it happens, to anybody. Then you've got procedures to say, okay, now we have to actually physically lay eyes on that product. We have to recall it. We have to get it back. We have to inventory it. And remember, all this is on the shot clock. Everything you do is being timed to make sure that you're doing so within an expedient period of time. And it's a matter of hours, not days. I mean, we are trying to actively get our arms around this. And traceability helps with this. It obviously does. That's the whole point of it. But some of it is just a little bit more of a gut feeling saying, hey, let's get our arms around this thing now. It's easier to release it than to say, hey, we missed it. And the idea being early warning systems, getting information from importers who say, hey, we're hearing some chatter out there. Because the federal government's chronically, they try and react as quick as they can, but it's a big machine. And the FDA, in this particular case, we're still trying to do their due diligence and discovery because they don't like, to recall stuff that doesn't need to be recalled. I mean, that's obviously not a good situation either. So it's very dynamic. It's very real time. And it's kind of heated. It's blowing and going while it's doing it. And you get your arms around it, then you start making good decisions.
Yeah. Fascinating to hear about that process because I think that, obviously like you said, some of these things come out and then they're in the news to warn consumers, right? And then it's kind of little panic. And then like you said too, like, I mean, there's, these customers, they have they have financial stake, right, in this inventory that they've invested in. Now it's potentially bad, and what do we do with it? And all these different questions kind of arise, right? So it's interesting to hear how you approach it as the one that's kind of almost centrally holding this inventory on their behalf, and how do we stop the movement and the potential risk of getting out there. So very interesting to hear that. And I'm curious, you talked earlier about training out the employees, right, and having them understand the different steps and procedures. So with a large, footprint and network like Lineage has, like around 500 buildings, you said, right? I mean, how do you make sure that, these standards, because, food safety standards, right? I mean, it's not really like an optional thing. Like, this is not like a 5S thing where it's like, oh, well, you didn't put the pallet in the right taped off box, right? Like, it's like, oh, okay, like, get it right the next time, right? But food safety is obviously, there's big risk there if you do something wrong. So how do you make sure that this is getting trained out properly across the network, and that those safety standards are being followed by, everybody from, at the lowest of the totem pole all the way to the top at all these individual buildings? I mean, how do you really accomplish that and make sure that it's robust and, the standards are being repetitively followed?
We've always said that food safety is it's not a competitive advantage, and it's non-negotiable. Those are the two fundamentals that we have. That everybody deserves safe food, and you don't compete on your safety record. And I'm serve on a lot of committees. I serve on safety committees within our industry, and we share safety data freely. I mean, it's not competitive. Everybody has a right to safe food, and we have an obligation to provide that safe food. So getting the differentiation is in how you support your own internal mechanisms. And we have a 4-part process. We are a large network, which makes it really complicated. I manage a very small team. I think on my team, my corporate team, we have maybe 10 people supporting in the U.S., North America, supporting 250 buildings. So you can do the math. There's a pretty broad spectrum of outreach. So each one of my corporate food safety professionals is supporting between 25 and 35 physical sites. Well, they can't be there every day. There's no way. And we don't want them to be every day. So we have a 4-step process, and it starts with how we onboard and train people. When I joined Lineage 7 years ago, we were hiring people. You give them your 1-day safety training, which includes, PPE and operational safety and forklift safety. Food safety wasn't necessarily a big part of their learning because food was frozen. I mean, frozen food is bulletproof, right? You can't hurt it. Well, we know that's not true because every food, has a different sensitivity. So we didn't really focus on that inside the box culture. We changed that. So when you're onboarded in our company, no matter what job you do, whether it's a forklift driver, a case picker, a maintenance engineer, customer service, your onboarding includes a safety training program. And we wrote the program, and it takes almost a day to go through just that program. It's food safety fundamentals, it's time and temperature relationships, it's sanitation, it's basic bacteria. It's a food safety 101 course that lets everybody who's onboarded into the company understand the fundamentals of food safety. What, not just keep it cold, keep it covered, keep it moving, but how do you recognize food safety risk, adulteration risk, biosecurity risk, site security risk? All of those things play into the overall picture. So the employee gets the fundamental training, and then at each of our buildings, we require that there is a dedicated, not a dedicated position, but a dedicated person, a person of contact who serves as that safety liaison, somebody that my team can effectively reach out to and say, hey, I need you to go do this or go do that, or tell me this or tell me that. Because we cannot be in the building every day. We need somebody who is actively able to verify certain safety procedures, go gather a record, go take a picture, whatever it is we need. So that safety person of contact is level 2. That person is required to participate in monthly safety calls where we have, if you're part of a specific food safety scheme like an SQF or a BRC, You meet with others in that same scheme, other facilities. So you have a peer group that you're talking about best practices. You're talking about food safety code changes. You're getting continuous education and training. So we train them, we identify that person of contact, and then we build capacity of that person of contact. We give them continuing education every month so that they become a mini food safety professional. Now, it may not be their full-time job. Most likely it's not, but it is their responsibility. And then that third level is supported by the fourth level, which is my team, which now has that one throat to choke, if you will, saying, hey, at each building, we've got a person who's got responsibility. They can interact with them. They can do a virtual audit. They can do a physical gap assessment. They can review their records. And it gives us confidence that that layered approach takes our food safety fundamentals throughout the entire network. And I actually think it's unique, but we're also unique in that we're one of the larger companies, and we've had to build that infrastructure because we can't just go drive by all 3 or 4 of our buildings. We've got hundreds of them. So we've got to create a virtual network.
Yeah, absolutely. And very fascinating to hear how you've kind of built out that infrastructure around the training, but also kind of the, I guess, redundancy in a sense, right? To be able to make sure like, okay, we're putting these standards forward, but who is actually, do we have a responsible party at each site to be able to monitor that, check in on that, verify things, execute trainings as well. I think that's really important to be able to solidify that, right? Like to your point, it's not like, okay, well,
that's the hardest piece because it's the most organic. I mean, those people change jobs. It's a warehouse worker level job. Yeah. I can't tell how many times we'll go to a monthly outreach and say, oh no, that person doesn't work anymore. That person's been reassigned to another job. Oh, we got to go we got to backfill that. I need a name. I need a person because we have to have that one-to-one communication at some point in time. Otherwise, you're kind of running blind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, really interesting to hear because, that becomes so important, right? And I think a lot of good takeaways, not only from training of food safety standards, but just like safety in general training or just warehouse training overall, like to make that robust and make that kind of standardized across the board, right? Especially when you scale to, 500 some buildings as you all have, right? Then, it becomes really important to make sure it's the same at every building, right? And you're getting that same level of food safety standard, as you said, is non-negotiable to be able to do that. So really interesting to learn about that and learn about how you kind of approach all of this. So now we talked a little bit about kind of the evolution of this food safety and how it's become more high touch almost in a sense over the last decade or so. And we talked about kind of like current state, what are you doing and how do you approach all of this? But what about into the future, right? Like what do you see food safety looking like over the next, let's say 5 years or so? Like how does that evolve? Does it get easier because of technology? Does it become more complex because the consumer behavior continues to change? Or what is your view on that?
Well, I don't think our consumer is going to get less demanding. Something tells me they're not going to ask for less information and they're not going to ask for it in a slower path. I just don't see that. I'll call the ball on that one. They're going to want it better and faster and cheaper. So, you always say you can get 2 of the 3, but not all 3. We're going to have to give them all 3. We're going to have to give it to them faster, better, and cheaper. So I see it as an inwardly facing and an outwardly facing challenge. Inwardly facing. And I think I speak for the industry and that we're not the only company that manages buildings that have some age. We always just say, look at the bones of the building. Are the bones good? If you got good bones in a building, then it can be upgraded. If you've got bad bones in a building, it's just an old building, then you need to think about decommissioning it per se. Not my job. My job is to assess the building and say, what does this building need to do to evolve to be consistent food safety performers? So we need to continually evaluate our structures, especially the aging ones, and say, do they have the tools they need to perform with the current expectations? Refrigeration control systems are a great example. I'm not an engineer, but like I told you earlier, we sell cold air. Well, if we can't create the best environment for the food through our management of cold air, our management of the structures through segregation in smaller rooms and other controls, then we're putting the food potentially at risk for higher dead bands, greater temperature fluctuations within the room in a microclimate. Well, that can create quality issues and safety issues if you can't create consistent storage. Or if you're doing for the processing within the building, do you have all the tools to do so without potentially introducing contamination? So we will continually evaluate internally to make sure that our buildings are capable of producing to our customers' expectations. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of capital and a lot of energy and emphasis, because we are being asked to do this, but we have to do so in a way that does no harm. So internally, that'll be our challenge. Externally, we are asked to provide not only case level, but each level traceability. That's the expectation. Now, I won't tell you that it cannot be done, because you could microchip or Bluetooth or RFID every single handheld burrito out there if you wanted to. But can it be done in a cost-effective manner? We're going to have to engineer cost effectiveness into this process, because simply saying, hey, I can label every single burrito, but it's going to cost you an extra $1 a burrito, that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So traceability is going to be the number one challenge of our industry. Case level traceability is going to be the expectation, but doing it in a cost effective manner is going to take innovation. And that's also where our business is going to evolve at a rapid pace. What is it going to do? How can we do what we need to do at pennies per each, as opposed to nickels or quarters or dollars per each? Because ultimately, the customer's going to want to pick up an egg and say, where did this egg come from? And you're going to look at the barcode on the back and say, oh, I can scan that. It came from a farm in Georgia. And that chicken's name was, Glorietta. Well, okay, great. But all of that data's got to get into our system somehow, right? And I don't know how to solve for that, but it will have to be solved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fascinating to see. I mean, obviously, the technology has evolved quite a bit, right, to be able to get us more pinpointed into some of those tracking things. But to your point, right, like at what cost to be able to do that, right? And then if we think about some of the situations too, right? I mean, the consumer that is concerned about the chicken being named Glorietta, and where is that chicken from? What farm did she raise on? Yes, yeah, all those things, right? Typically, that's not going to come from like a large production farm, right? That's going to be more of like a specialized kind of smaller farm, which means that they're not going to have the systems and the technology in place to be able to do that. So how do we take that technology and bring it all the way through the supply chain and enable the suppliers, the consumers, and in between to be able to see all that? I think is going to be the complex problem to solve.
Well,
right?
How do we, when your customer said, well, did Glorietta have GMOs in her diet? How do we answer it? And that's a valid question.
Yeah.
But it's data. And you said it's not going to be the Purdue's and the Tysons that are going to have that Glorietta. It's going to be the family farm. It's going to be the free range backyards, and they have to capture data. They have to get it into a standardized format. They have to transfer that data to their buyer. The buyer has to transfer that data to the warehouse, and we've got to push it through out on a BOL that goes 4 steps down the road before it gets to Whole Foods. That is I mean, that's an algorithm that I can't even begin to think about. There's a massive data science challenge there. Opportunity. Let me say opportunity.
Absolutely.
That's an opportunity, not a challenge.
Opportunity, yes. Any data science students listening, there's your opportunity right there for your future, for sure. So really appreciate you coming on here, Dr. Neel, and joining us today to talk about this. Obviously, a very fascinating topic, and one that impacts everybody, right? Everybody eats food, and that food safety becomes critical to be able to do that. So really interesting to hear how you're approaching it at Lineage, and also kind of your thoughts on how this is continuing to evolve well into the future, and some of the challenges that arise around this. I think it's a really, really interesting topic. So appreciate your time on the show today. If people are interested in learning more about Lineage, or maybe getting in touch to talk a little bit more about food safety, what's the best way to do that?
You can certainly visit our website. We've got a pretty comprehensive website, and I'm always available. That food safety is not a corporate secret. I'm Neel at onelineage.com. So happy to share what I know or deflect you into the right area. But I just stress, get inside the box and see temperatures the way the food sees it, and we can solve problems on the basis of that understanding.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here. So, Stephen, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
Pleasure. Thank you, sir.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.